Hello everybody, it's vanburman here. Welcome back to another video. This is your first time seeing it, but it is my third time recording it. So very good. This is as you can see by the title, a comparison video between the original Steam Deck and the Steam Deck OLED that I've decided to buy. And before I sold my original Steam Deck, I thought it would be quite interesting to do a video just going through the two different ones, maybe why I went for the OLED and which one I think is better. So I have also ran a couple of benchmarks. Well, was on camera, now not on camera, and the results are confusing. But for the most part, I think it's fair to say that they are basically identical in terms of performance. It is the quality of life features, I think, that make the difference between the two. So this is the original Steam Deck, or my original one, which was the 256GB one, and I just have a screen protector on there. That's it. Nothing else has been changed. Obviously, there's a few scuffs and stuff. It's a handheld device. It's going to happen, and I think the material as well doesn't lend itself well to like scratches and stuff per se. But yeah, it's held up pretty well in the time I've had it. I've used it quite a lot, as you know, although admittedly quite a lot docked with a Bluetooth controller, which is very convenient and doesn't change from either deck, just making the point really. So the key differences are that there is no accent button on the power switch, and all of the colouring on the front is a lot more clear, I guess clear because it's white, to match the contrast. And then if we look at the OLED Steam Deck, so that has like a much more grey and black aesthetic, much darker, which I didn't actually clock until I made my first video attempt this evening. So you also have the orange power button as well. It's probably the easiest way, distinguishing way to be able to tell which one is which, because they're the same size. I've got my translucent green backing on the OLED version. I did have it on my original Steam Deck, so I put the original back panel on and moved the 2TB SD over to the new OLED deck, which I will go into. Actually, in fact, I'll talk about it now. So the good things about the new OLED deck in terms of getting into it are that all of these screws are the same size. So on the original Steam Deck, the ones in the corners are longer than the ones in the middle section, which does make screw placement and putting things back in much easier. I'll give that a plus. And that's it. I think that the standoffs where they go into is actually, I think they might be metal, or then don't look as fragile as the ones on the original Steam Deck, which I know is something that was raised by the community when the Steam Deck was first released. Now the bad part, or yes, one of the bad parts, is that once you do take off the back cover and you want to change the SD card, there is a cover, basically where that black bit is, which is an extra heatsink for this particular case. And on the original Steam Deck, it's 1, 2, 3 screws, I think, or 4 screws, and then that panel pops right off. They're obviously quite small screws, but still. And then you can see the SD card, and you can take it out and change it quite easily, with the exception of the insulating foil tape thing that it has to stop the interference with the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth modules. Now on the OLED deck, you have to take off a ribbon cable and a very small 4-wire connector that is quite fragile. And I do this a fair bit, as you probably know, because I've been into the back of my Nothing phone and changed the camera modules and things like that. I was a little bit concerned by how fragile that was and how difficult it was to get out for being such a small connector. So from that side of things, yeah, it's not as easy to go in and do it. And as a general consideration, it's something that might well be worth actually bearing in mind. Well, certainly worth bearing in mind if you do decide to take it apart. And obviously the new OLED deck comes in 512 and 1TB, I think, models. So definitely not a big of a reason to go in and change out the SD card. Like, for example, from a 256 or a 64 gig. Although because now the 2 terabyte models are much more affordable, particularly when they first came out. It's definitely worth going and doing. I think you can quite easily have close to 3 terabytes effectively of storage on the deck by having a terabyte SD and then a 2 terabyte internal SSD. So that side of things was not the best, and hopefully that is not a recurring theme if I have to go in and do anything else with the deck. I mean, I've been into the back of my deck to do a couple of other things as well, the original one, and that was all perfectly fine. And obviously there's the thing about changing out the battery. It's still glued in, I believe, is what I've read. But yeah, anyway. So I was reading my good friend who is a friend of the channel, Alexia's article that I will post below for you to go and read if you want to. And it was really good. And I thought, you know what, hopefully there's a good enough few reasons here for me to decide to get the OLED one, because I can sell my old one effectively and obviously make back some of the money. And that's what I decided to do, ultimately, in the end. And the majority of the things for me that were the reason to go for the OLED is definitely the extended battery. So I think it's on average an extra hour's worth of battery, depending on what you're doing, which is really, really useful for handhelds like this. Going from 2 to 3 hours, you might think, well, that's only an extra hour. But, it's like effectively 33% more. And obviously there's other things you can do to extend your battery life, dropping the frame rate, that type of thing, which is still all available. And I'm glad to say that, particularly from like using this as a benchmark point from when I bought my original Steam Deck, like everything has matured. All the UI, all the options that you can go into, the compatibility with like getting up on an external screen for a hub, just the game compatibility as well is vastly increased. Definitely want to do a video on that at some point soon, because I think that's really impressive, the amount that they've come on since the launch of the first Steam Deck, since the original Steam Deck, I suppose. And I think that's it for me, really. They were the key bits. Now, a lot of people will mention, and it's very popular to mention, the whole OLED thing. It's always got an OLED screen now. It's like great, more vibrant, extra colors, extra brightness, and the color bit I can get. I think that has been an improvement. The brightness side of things and the specific like features of the OLED, I don't really do too much for me. I have an OLED monitor and I do have the brightness turned down on it. I have to turn down the brightness on the Steam Deck, actually, on the new Steam Deck. What I will say, as a slight addendum, is that on the new Steam Deck, I have bought a aftermarket anti-glare glass cover for it, protector, and that does drop some of the brightness a tad, which actually works really well for me because it's more to my preference. And I know it doesn't look as good on camera, I don't think, as the original one, because my original one is glossy. It's the 256 version. And that probably actually comes across as a bit clearer. You can see the ring light quite easily. You can't on the anti-glare one, but you have in real life, you have much better viewing angles on this anti-glare screen protector. And I think if I was, I've already got a screen protector on my original Steam Deck, but if I was to put a screen protector on my original Steam Deck again, I would definitely get one of the anti-glare ones. I think particularly as they're the same price. So, although I guess it depends what kind of situations you're going to be using it in. If you're doing a lot of traveling, I'd absolutely get the anti-glare one. If you're like me and you're going to probably dock it, actually maybe it doesn't really make that much difference. So, but definitely, I think a screen protector is always the way to go, no matter what. And totally lost what I was going to say. I was talking about the OLED bit, wasn't I? Yeah. So for me, it's not really that much of a big selling point. I don't really get the hype, so to speak. I think there's definitely a case to be made for colors. But the key bit about the screen for me was the 90 hertz refresh rate. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, it is. For just general UI stuff, extra snappy, for games that can games that you can utilize that on. So one example that I can think of is something like Vampire Survivors, where you could go up to 90 FPS because it's a really low weight game that runs really well on the Steam Deck. I guess Peglin could go to 90 frames as well. So it's not superfluous, but obviously in your AAA games, it's not going to be much use to you. But it's nice to have that extra. And I think even just like on phones where you've got like a 90 hertz or 120 hertz option, it just makes everything feel a bit smoother. I think there is a noticeable difference, not as much as like 30 to 60, but 60 to 90 is a little bit, and then 60 to 120 is a good bit. But yeah, obviously, if you can go from 30 to 60, that's the like golden upgrade, if you like, for me anyway, in terms of it being noticeable and actually improving quality of life. But still, 60 to 90 is a nice bump. And I think those things all together, battery life mainly, was worth the money to me to do the upgrade. I think if I was like the average person, I'm obviously quite into my techie bits. That's why we're here. I would probably go with a cheaper original deck, and then get an SD card installed. I think that's probably the best way to go to get the best experience. In terms of value for money. So, right. So I ran 2 benchmarks on both Steam Decks. I ran Tiny Tina's Wonderland benchmark, and I also ran the Tekken benchmark. Just once, actually twice for Tiny Tina's Wonderland, because I had it installed on the SD card on the OLED, and it did worse than the original Steam Deck. And I then put it on the internal SD card, and it did a bit better. Unfortunately, for Tiny Tina's Wonderland, for whatever reason, it runs better on my original Steam Deck. So it was getting about 59 FPS on average for the benchmark, and my OLED got 55 FPS on average. So I'm not really too sure as to why that is, and I don't really have any answer. If I'm honest, my expectation was that the OLED would be slightly quicker, maybe even not by that much. I thought one might be 55, one might be 57, for example. But yeah, a bit of an anomaly. Maybe this is just a really good Steam Deck. I don't know. And maybe I should run it again, I guess, just to make sure, which I might do off camera. I then did the Tekken benchmark, which is, I don't know how they do it, because they just everything stops working for 5 seconds and they give you a score. But I got a 46 on my original Steam Deck, and I got a 48 on the Steam Deck OLED. Now that's the sort of thing I was expecting to do, and I should say that if it is something you want to see, I'm happy to pick like 5 games, I guess, that are from my normal suite that I used to do for like testing graphics cards and stuff, and just to see what the difference is between the two. You want to see that, let me know. Something I might do anyway, but to just need time to set it up and get the games installed and capture cards and everything ready. That might be interesting before I sell my Steam Deck. And what else was there? Yeah, so I can't really explain the Tiny Tina's Wonderland benchmark. I haven't used it before, in just mainstream testing, so I can't really say if there's any nuances in there for it. The Tekken one, like I say, was the other way around. The nice thing supposedly about the Steam Deck OLED, which is back here, is that because it is a smaller process die node thing for the CPU or the APU, I suppose, it should use less power, hence the increased, and the bigger battery, hence the increased battery life. But it also should run cooler as well, technically. And I've not really had a chance to verify or test that out, so I'm not going to go on. Not going to make any statements on that. Not had the OLED one long enough to say. And the same thing with the noise profile as well. I think from the limited time I've used it in handheld mode, I feel as though the OLED is, I don't know whether it's necessarily quieter, but I would say the sound profile is more comfortable. And that's about it. That's about all I can say. I never really had a problem with the normal Steam Deck. I think for me on the normal Steam Deck, adding this, even though this plate gets particularly hot, was an improvement. Gained a few couple degrees drop in temperature, but also it kept the noise down a little bit for a little bit longer. And I'm hoping that will, I'm obviously using it from the get-go with the OLED, but I'm hoping that will also be the case, and I'll get an incremental decrease in temperature and also increased comfortable noise levels. And I think that is about it. I don't know what else I can really say. I think from the original time when I had the Steam Deck, now is a great time to get one, even if you're going to get the original one. There's lots of really good offers that Valve do, especially with like the refurbished one, the refurbished scheme, that kind of thing. I don't know what the warranty is on that. You might want to have a look, make sure you are getting your 12 months still, because it's a really good entry point. I think it's just over £300, which for what you get is incredible, really. It's very much the same as the laptop that I've got with the 5500U in it, in terms of its performance and its capability. And that cost me about that same amount of money, slightly less. But to have it in such a nice form factor with now what we're looking to be like a fairly mature OS, mature in terms of compatibility, usability, stability. I think they've all increased like tenfold probably since it was first released. It's now really nice to use. The UI, probably because I've been using it a lot as well, but it feels very intuitive, even when they've added new options in. And it's really just, the nice part is it's still really customizable in terms of managing your performance to your taste, being able to monitor like FPS, battery usage, GPU temperatures, CPU temperatures. Maybe that's just me that I really like that. I don't really know how, I guess, the average person uses their Steam Deck. It'd be interesting if Valve did some sort of release on that. If people do generally tend to have the the stats up on the screen. I tend to have them on like literally all the time. Even just mainly, I think I could probably get away with knowing my FPS and knowing how much battery life I got left. They're the two things that I find quite important and interesting. I mean, I have my FPS all the time on my desktop computer, although I don't have to worry about how much battery life I've got left, luckily. Or not yet, anyway. Never know. That might happen one day. So, yes, I'm not upset to have made the move, but I don't think it's the best value. And I think that is probably where you need to draw the line. If you are interested in getting a Steam Deck, is it worth the extra money? And then if you've already got the original Steam Deck, are those features, is having that extra potentially hour battery life and slightly more comfortable noise profile, if that is what it is, and a slightly, higher screen resolution, going to be worth it or not? I don't know. Like I say, I'm not the best judge for the OLED panel. Doesn't really do that much for me. In fact, like I say, I find it too bright, generally speaking. But I can't argue that it is nicer colours and nicer to use because of the high frame rate. So yeah, let me know what you think, please. I'll be very interested to see that. And if there's anything, like I say, anything you want me to do before I decide to part ways with my original Steam Deck, do let me know. I'd be more than happy to do, like I say, some benchmarking or whatnot. And yeah, like I say, the Tiny Tina thing is weird, but these things happen from time to time. So I'd have to do like a 10 average of a 10 run set really in order to fully get the picture on that. Okay, well, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. And I did have some overhead shots and all that sort of stuff, but they're all corrupt. So maybe next time. Thank you and good night.